Hello and welcome to Content Area Research Group 2, Literacy in the Science Classroom. Just to give you a bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about in this presentation today, we're of course going to talk about the science classroom itself, the literacy demands of the content area, the typical texts that are utilized within the classroom, as well as English language learners in the science classroom. Joanne will be talking to you about new texts that could be incorporated into the science classroom as opposed to the texts that are typically utilized, which is what I'll be talking about. The new literacies that could also be incorporated into the classroom, the importance and the roles and responsibilities of the literacy coach, and the ICTs and the Common Core curriculum, as well as the next generation standards that could impact science instruction based on these changing standards, as well as the new literacies that we are incorporating into the curriculum. So first I wanted to start off with this quote from the Wisconsin Foundation for Disciplinary Literacy. And basically it really focuses on the concept of communication, not just in science, of course, in any discipline, but especially in science. It allows students to think about prior knowledge, activate what it is they already know about a concept, about a perspective, and encourages them to ask questions. It is a classroom that is focused on inquiry-based learning. It's a classroom that is focused on data analysis. And really without communication and communication skills, students find it difficult to really learn what it is they have to learn in the science classroom. And truly, one of the purposes of science education is, of course, to help students understand the natural world around them and why things occur the way they occur. So really, if we think about science teachers, they really do play a pivotal role in aiding in student understanding of the world around them. So what does the disciplinary literacy science classroom look like? From our Content Matters textbook, the science classroom learning activities, assignments, and assessments work together primarily to help engage students in a science apprenticeship of sorts, while of course deepening their content knowledge. So this concept of student engagement is really a theme that I've seen throughout the research that I've done for this particular presentation. And of course, student engagement involves interactivity, it involves student-centered learning, it involves questioning and inquiry, which we always want to encourage and incorporate in all of our classrooms despite the content area. Another element that is pointed out in Content Matters about the science classroom is the fact that, of course, students are not themselves scientists, and science education as a whole has a different goal than the goal of the field of science outside of the classroom. So with this incorporation of time and structure, time, of course, meaning time given to students to understand a task, as well as time for them to complete a task, and structure, hopefully each classroom has very specific guidelines and protocol and procedure that students are familiar with, really helps students stay focused on whatever task they're being given. We know that student-centered lessons and student engagement is always the goal whenever it comes to especially difficult lessons or tasks. So student-centered lessons and questioning and student engagement is really the key points in creating a science classroom that leads to a positive learning environment for our students. In Content Matters, it also discusses the concept of science education specifically for K through 12 students. And really one of the main goals is to help our students understand both the content or core subject matter of the discipline of science and the nature of science. So again, we know students are not scientists themselves, but we can help them understand certain key concepts and to really understand the content. And as literacy specialists, we can help science teachers do that. So this is a graphic from the science teacher about creating a lesson in the science classroom. And again, we just want to make sure we're supporting student engagement, um, being collaborative with other students, having conversations that lead to thoughtful and informed writing, because of course writing is involved in science, especially when you get to the secondary level. And a framework that really engages students in defining problems, identifying solutions to problems, of course, obtaining and evaluating data and analyzing that data in whatever the task or the assessment would be for that particular lesson. Some of the literacy demands of the science classroom include asking questions, we said hypothesizing when they're experimenting, creating and planning the experiments, which involves its own type of questioning and different levels of vocabulary, interpreting data, and analyzing the data and the evidence once any experiment is complete. So one of the questions that I came across that really stuck out to me was, how can science classroom teachers create an environment that promotes literacy within such a difficult content area? As I mentioned earlier, science is difficult for even some of the brightest of students, and there are students who graduate high school who really feel like they didn't learn anything in their science classroom. So how is it we can prevent that from happening? Some of the strategies for meeting some of these literacy demands include some oldies but goodies that we've all sort of relied on. KWL charts, anticipation guides to activate prior knowledge and to activate vocabulary, graphic organizers to help students organize whatever information they find, be it listing, be it creating different webs or graphic charts to help them better organize the information that they found. Joanne is also going to address how types of questioning and student accountability can also help meet literacy demands in the classroom when she talks about the role of the literacy coach in the science classroom. So she'll also go into where the role of the literacy coach comes into play in terms of how can we meet these literacy demands, how can we help the students meet all of these requirements in the science classroom. So in order to ensure a purposeful, coherent, and productive discussion and learning in the classroom, we really want to promote this sense of literacy through different types of questioning on our end and on the end of the science teacher. So for instance, when it talks about verify and clarify, you can clarify your own information by rephrasing it, or you can also revoice a student's contribution. So you can help the speaker and the listener better understand and engage more profitably in the conversation that's being held. Of course, we know modeling is very helpful. So when you're making your thinking public, when you're demonstrating what the expectation is for a certain experiment or for a certain assessment, modeling is a teacher standing up front and saying, here's what good experimenters do, and then giving an example. Building on prior knowledge for students, of course, we know to tie whatever our current condition is back to knowledge that was accumulated earlier somewhere else. So how does this connect to what we did last time? And of course, at the end, when everything's all said and done, recapping what students have learned. So making public in a concise, coherent form what the group has achieved. So what have we discovered here? What has been understood based on this experiment or based on this task that we have completed? English language learners in the science classroom really do struggle perhaps a little bit more than our typical students in the classroom Learning science itself is language intensive. Students might have to interpret the meaning of models, support claims with evidence, communicate arguments, discuss phenomena and scientific principles. All of these concepts discussed in the Understanding Language article from Stanford with Quinley and Valdez, they really go into just how difficult it is for English language learners to really understand key concepts and content just because of the type of language that's used in a science classroom. So it includes additional challenges. They have to learn to listen to teachers and peers while they're developing their oral skills. And there are so many words that have different meanings. The example they give is the word table. There's the water table, a data table, a kitchen table, all of which are used differently in different contexts. This is a difficult concept for English language learners to understand. So literacy strategies, language support strategies, discourse, home language support, and home culture connections all help English language learners understand what's going on in the science classroom. Discourse strategies include different modes of communication, so using a table versus perhaps giving a lecture, anything that can help aid in a student's understanding of a concept within the classroom. The next generation science standards and Common Core state standards also encourage educators to develop English language learners' language and literacy in the context of learning subject matter. So by carefully selecting texts that support students in literacy and science, literacy coaches and science teachers are able to better aid in their learning experience. And one of the things that Joanne is going to talk about are the new types of texts that we can incorporate in the classroom to help students such as English language learners better understand what's going on. Specifically, some of the areas where English language learners face more difficulty include vocabulary, discourse, which I discussed earlier, modes of representation, as well as science texts themselves. So again, the use of complex and varying text is really one of the best ways to get over this hurdle for English language learners in the classroom. So speaking of the types of texts that are used, the common ones that we've pretty much seen before are textbooks, are big chunky textbooks that are organized in a certain way that include invariably very required information and important information based on content, but perhaps is not organized in the best way for students to be able to best understand a content. Popular texts such as science magazines as well are also used, and primary scientific literature like academic journal articles are also used. Trade books would be one of the new additions that teachers could use to help students better understand different content based on different sources. So here are some of the strategic questions for different scientific texts in the classroom as well. And again, based on what students are reading, it depends on what types of questions they will be asking in order to get to the information that they need to understand content or a concept. And integrating the three types of science texts, again, really depend on what type of activity you're using, at what level are you teaching, what's the content. All of this, of course, can also affect how students, whether they're ELL or not, understand a certain concept. So I'm going to end my portion with this quote again from the Wisconsin Foundation for Disciplinary Literacy. Educators help students recognize and understand the nuances of a discipline by using strategies that make their thinking visible. And I think this concept of visible thinking is really important for students to understand key concepts, to understand difficult texts and difficult content within such a difficult area like the science classroom. Joanne will be talking to you all about some exciting new texts that can be used in the classroom, new literacies, which of course we want to incorporate so we have our students prepared to utilize and be literate in different literacies that are coming about, not just in the classroom but outside of it, and the next generation standards that could impact science instruction in the classroom now.